History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to History Goes Bump Redux. I'm your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this Redux, we are featuring a location that we did almost at the beginning of starting History Goes Bump, and that's the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri. Since that time, I have visited this location several times, so we're looking forward to representing it to everybody with you as my co-host.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Are you ready to go back?
I'm ready. The Lemp family and lager beer go hand in hand. What started out as a grocery business grew into a beer empire in St. Louis, Missouri that brought success and wealth to the Lemp family. But what almost endures more in regards to the Lemp family are the tragic lives of its members. The mansion they built witnessed sorrow and death. Suicide seemed to run in the family. This unfortune has led to rumors of hauntings. Join us as we explore the history and hauntings of the Lemp Mansion.
I've been inside the Lemp Mansion 3 times. The first time was a private tour of the house with the woman who hosted the public ghost tours, and that's Betsy Bellinger. She just happened to be the mother-in-law of a friend, and she still leads the tours there. Very nice lady. We sat down and had dinner with her, and then she took us around on the tour. And for those of you who listen, I think it was like one of the road trip episodes that we threw up or something. Anyway, it was a very difficult tour to do because about halfway through it, I kept feeling my cell phone going off like crazy. And I finally told her, I said, you know what? I'm going to look at my phone. I don't want to be rude, but I really feel like somebody's trying to get a hold of me. And it was because we were having an emergency situation with our friend who was watching our dog. And she ended up having to go to the animal ER. And we were just freaked out for the rest of the tour. So I remember bits and pieces of it, but it was definitely very emotional for us. Because she was leading us, we got to see places that most guests don't get to see. The second time that we went, we actually had a bunch of listeners join us, and we got to have like a little private room to ourselves where we got to have lunch and got to see the rest of the mansion and stuff like that. So that was cool. And then the third time, I just went and had lunch with Tammy and Brian Burrows.
Very nice.
Yeah. There are many legends connected to the mansion, some that probably aren't true, but the true parts are very sad. Today, the mansion serves up some great food and rents out the rooms like a bed and breakfast. Many people claim to have experienced strange things here, but for all my visits, I wouldn't say the place is haunted. I literally have never had anything happen to me here.
That remains to be seen. We may have to revisit at some point and actually investigate.
Well, and that was the point I was going to make, is I also haven't done a formal investigation here, so that needs to be rectified, and then it may prove that we do have something going on here, because I know a lot of people who are listeners and other people that I know that are friends that are paranormal investigators have had plenty of stuff happen at this place. So there's got to be something going on there, but I just haven't had anything happen to me. The history of the mansion starts with Johann Adam Lemp, who was born in 1793 in Groningen, which is located in the German province of Hessen. Everyone called Johann by the name Adam, and he spent his youth learning the brewer's trade, eventually becoming a master brewer, which means he would be very good friends with us. That's my favorite part of the Lemp Mansion, the beer.
Great.
He set his sights on America and sailed for the land of opportunity in 1836. His plan started out with an idea to settle in Cincinnati, Ohio, but he decided he would rather be further west, and he moved to St. Louis, Missouri in 1838. The next piece of his plan was to start a grocery business, and he opened a small grocer. And then he put his knowledge of brewing to work, and before long, his grocery store was the only one selling beer in the area. Adam brewed vinegar as well.
The beer and vinegar sales were good, and Adam decided that perhaps he should put his focus on those two items. The Western Brewing Company was established officially sometime between 1840 and 1842. Records disagree with each other on the actual year. Adam moved to a larger complex at 112 South 2nd Street between Walnut and Elm Streets, and the plant continued to manufacture vinegar and beer. But just don't mix the two.
Oh, God, no. Please, no.
Ew. A pub was built onto the factory, and this is where Adam sold his beer. By 1845, Adam was brewing only beer at his brewery. Some claim that Adam was the first to brew lager beer, having brought the yeast over with him from Germany. We will let beer historians argue on that point, but suffice it to say, Adam Lemp had a unique commodity, and people were buying it up, and he was the first to bring brewing to St. Louis. Lager beer was unique in that it did not have to be refrigerated or drunk quickly before it would go bad. Its yeast is bottom fermenting, which most ales have a top fermenting yeast.
That is why you should refrigerate your IPAs.
Gotcha.
Don't really want to leave your IPAs to get warm on the shelf. You want to put it in a refrigerator. The success of the Lemp Brewing Company led to a big issue. The factory was too small to store all the beer during the lager process. Adam came up with an ingenious solution. A natural limestone cave had been discovered on the outskirts of town, and Lemp found that if they used ice from the Mississippi River to keep the cave cold, he could use it to store his beer during the lager process. The cave held 20 to 30 barrels of beer, and by the end of 1845, 3,000 barrels of beer had been stored in the cave.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's great that he came up with that idea. It is ingenious.
Absolutely.
The brewery continued to grow, and by 1850, it was producing 40,000 barrels of beer annually worth $24,000. In 1858, Adam's beer captured first place at the St. Louis Fair.
Adam Lemp died in 1862, and while he was not a millionaire, he was very wealthy and had become known as the father of beer in St. Louis.
Which does tend to get kind of lost because you got the Anheuser-Busch's there, and they get a lot more attention.
His funeral procession had 30 horse-drawn carriages.
That seems similar to what I'll probably have for mine.
Okay. Better pull out some more life insurance or something, because that's going to be expensive. Adam left the brewery to both his son William Jacob Lemp and grandson Charles Bronick. The will stipulated that if either contested the will, then the other man would receive the full inheritance. That's one way to get them to cooperate with each other.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I think that's a good thing to put in if you've got kids that you think are going to be fighting after you pass away. Good idea.
I think it's good regardless, because you never know. Sometimes after somebody passes, all these crazy arguments come out of the woodwork.
You hire a lawyer, you lose it all.
The two formed a partnership and changed the name to William J. Lemp and Company. The partnership only lasted 2 years, and William bought out Charles. William had been born in Germany in 1835 and came to America when he was 12.
Now, if you look at those dates, I said that Adam had come over here in 1836. So his son didn't come till he was 12. They left William back in Europe, back there in Germany.
Well, sometimes people would immigrate over to build their company, establish themselves, things of that nature. So it's not that unusual for the time.
That's why I have you, Kelly, because you're like my voice of reason and, hey, take a step back. You know, he was trying to build a life before he got his family all involved in everything.
William worked in brewing at his father's Western Brewery, but decided to join the Army in 1861 and fight on the side of the Union. That same year, William married Julia Fikert, and they had 9 children. An infant son who died at birth, William Jr., Louis, Anna, Charles, Frederick, Hilda, Edwin, and Elsa. William had mustered out of the army fairly soon after he joined, so he was ready to take over the brewery when his father passed. His experience helped him to make the Lemp Brewery twice as successful as it had been under his father. William built a new factory over the limestone storage cave.
The Lemp Mansion was built in 1868 by William's father-in-law, Jacob Fikert. The architecture was Italianate, and when William purchased the home in 1876, he expanded the house to 33 rooms and added Victorian decor. He also had 3 huge vaults built where the family would store all their valuables, including artwork, when they left town. A tunnel was built between the house and the brewery, and a portion of the limestone cave was converted to a ballroom, auditorium, and swimming pool.
Nice.
Yeah. These were accessed via another tunnel that no longer is open. In 1884, a radiator system was installed. Radiant heat had been patented 5 years earlier. An open-air elevator was installed where the grand staircase had been several years later. Today, only a portion of the lift still exists. The parlor's ceiling was hand-painted, and the fireplace mantels were made from intricately carved African mahogany. An atrium was located behind the parlor, and exotic plants and birds were kept here. A unique feature of the main bathroom was a glass-enclosed, freestanding shower that William had discovered at an Italian hotel and brought back to St. Louis.
Goodness.
And ladies, today that is in the ladies' room at the mansion.
Nice.
So make sure if you go there to have a meal that you go into the restroom so that you can see that. It's still there. It's very cool.
And take a shower, right?
Well, I don't know that
shower in it? No?
I don't think that they would want to be, unless you're an exhibitionist.
Oh, well.
Then you're more than welcome. But the house also featured a sink with glass legs and a barber chair. The bedrooms were on the second floor with the servants' quarters on the third floor. The third floor also had an observation deck and skylight. Another bathroom in the mansion featured a white granite shower stall and a marble and cast iron mantel. The basement held the wine cellar and kitchen, and there was a laundry room down there as well. The kitchen was completely modernized at the time.
By the 1870s, the Lemp factory was the biggest in the city of St. Louis. William moved on to establish coast-to-coast distribution. The Lemp Brewery was the first to accomplish this feat with the use of refrigerated railroad cars. The future was bright, and William was grooming his favorite son to take over the operation. All seemed well until 1901. Frederick Lemp was William's 4th son and his favorite son, and he was heir apparent. In 1901, he died under mysterious circumstances, but Frederick had multiple health issues, and it is believed that he died of heart failure. William was devastated by the death of his son, and he spiraled into a depression. On February 13, 1904, William ate breakfast and claimed he didn't feel well as he retired to his room. Shortly thereafter, at 9:30 a.m., a servant girl heard a gunshot. She ran to William's room and found the door locked, so she ran to the brewery to get William Jr. and Edwin. They ran back to the house and broke down the door. Inside, they found their father barely alive, lying on the bed in a pool of blood with a gaping wound on the right side of his head. Doctors came and verified the inevitable. William was going to die, and he did at 10:15 a.m. This was only the first of several suicides to take place in the Lemp family. "40 carriages made a procession to Bell Fountain Cemetery, where the Lemp family had a large mausoleum.
William Lemp Jr., or Billy as everyone called him, had gone to the same university as his father, and he'd studied brewing of beer as well. He married Lillian Hadland in 1899. She was known as the Lavender Lady because it was her favorite color.
I love that.
I don't know, Kelly. This might be a little bit much.
Says you. I kind of know the story.
She painted her carriages in that color, and most of her wardrobe consisted of that color. Billy took over operations at the brewery after his father's suicide, and he continued the success his father had with the brewery. He also moved into the Lemp Mansion. Unbeknownst to the Lemp family and beer and liquor makers across America, temperance was gaining a foothold and prohibition was on its way. The cave swimming pool that we had described earlier became a place for true decadence. Billy hosted lavish parties where he supplied his wealthy friends with prostitutes and liquor. It was during this time that it is rumored that Billy fathered an illegitimate son who was born with Down syndrome. The the boy was reportedly hidden in the attic during his lifetime. Now, I don't know if that's true, if it's just a legend, but it is something that they say about the family. And it does seem to be backed up with some of the haunting activity we'll be talking about in a little bit. In 1908, Lily filed for divorce from Billy, claiming abandonment and cruelty. She got custody of their child, William III.
Problems would continue for Billy, finally culminating in the brewery shutting down in 1919 because of prohibition. Falstaff was the name the Lemp family had given their beer, and the trademark was sold off and the brewery was auctioned off to the International Shoe Company.
And it actually has International Shoe Company on the outside of the factory.
All
still
right.
to this day.
Billy fell into despair, and in 1922, he shot himself in the front left dining room of the mansion, which was his office at the time. Billy was probably not only depressed over his failed business, but over the death of his youngest sister, Elsa Lemp Wright, the wealthiest heiress in St. Louis. She had been William Sr.'s youngest child and had married a man named Thomas with whom she had a horrible relationship. They often fought and things would get physical. Thomas cheated regularly on Elsa, and one day she caught him in bed with a servant girl. She grabbed a fireplace poker and chased him down the road.
I could just see that. That would have been interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm. Another time, she rammed her car into his car 3 times after catching him in bed with another woman.
I wonder if she shouted Tawanda as she did it. Did you ever see Fried Green Tomatoes?
You are terrible. Oh my God. That was a movie. This is real life. They had a child who was stillborn. Elsa separated from Thomas after that in 1918 and divorced him in 1919. She did reconcile with Thomas in 1920 and they remarried, but a few days later, she shot herself in the head while in bed at her and Thomas's home. So by 1922, 3 of the Lemps had committed suicide. Maybe. Some people think Elsa was murdered by Thomas.
We'll never know, but I wouldn't put it past their relationship for that being the case, especially since they were so newly married to each other again. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors. William Sr.'s son, Charles, took over residence at the Lemp Mansion after his nephew's suicide in 1929. He lived a reclusive life and possibly suffered from mental illness, which clearly seems to run in the family. In 1941, he sent a letter to a funeral home stating that when he died, he wanted his body taken to the Missouri crematory and that it should not be clothed, bathed, or changed in any way. He wanted to be cremated and have his ashes put in a wicker box and buried on his farm, and he wanted no funeral. 8 years later, he would shoot his dog dead and then turn the gun on himself and shoot himself in the head.
Okay, but why would you shoot your dog?
Well, he didn't want to leave him behind, apparently, I guess. But
So did they cremate the dog with him?
I don't know. I do know that they followed his wishes, so I would assume they probably did and just put his ashes in that wicker box too. Yeah, I mean, clearly this family with suicide, it's the number one thing that they're really known for other than beer.
William III would die before his uncle Charles in 1943 from a heart attack when he was only 42 years of age. Edwin was the last of William Sr.'s children, and he died at 90 in 1970. He had all the family heirlooms and artwork burned.
Can you imagine?
No. Oh my goodness.
Your grandfather built these vaults into this home so that they could protect that stuff every time they left town. And then you're the last one, so you just burn it all. Doesn't want to have anybody else have it?
I just don't. I would love to be able to have a conversation with him and find out why. Like, why? Why would you do that?
Yeah, and if he could see into the future, now, of course, it's going to go through becoming a boarding house and stuff, so you tend to lose things during that. But how great would it be if you had their actual artwork and heirlooms still in this house that used to be theirs?
The Lemp Mansion had earlier fallen into decline and in 1949 was sold out of the Lemp family. It became a boarding house. In the 1960s, construction on the Ozark Expressway caused the mansion to lose much of its grounds and 2 carriage houses. It fell into further disrepair until 1975 when the Pointer family bought the property and restored it. The building is now the Lemp Mansion Restaurant and Inn. The inn has 4 suites, each named for a member of the Lemp family. Special events are held regularly and the Lemp Experience and Haunted Tours are hosted.
It did have 6 suites before So I don't know if they're like doing some refurbishing or remodeling or what happened that now it's only 4.
Or did they expand a couple of them to take over the other space?
That could be the case because the rooms are pretty spacious. But when I went there were 6 suites.
Okay. Well, if anybody knows, if any listeners know, reach out to us and let us know.
As of 2023 on their website, it says that there's 4 suites that you can rent. And that expressway that took away part of their land, the Lemp Mansion sits right on it. So when you're driving down the highway, you can see the Lemp Mansion.
I mean, that's kind of cool, but unfortunate for traffic sounds and so forth. But
that is true. When people stay there, they do complain a bit on the traffic sounds. Tragedy and hauntings go hand in hand, and the Lemp Mansion is no exception. The home is considered to be one of the most haunted locations in America. Boarding house residents were the first to complain about hearing disembodied footsteps. During renovations of the mansion, workers experienced slamming doors, an oppressive feeling throughout the mansion, and other strange noises. A painter who had been working on restoring the painted ceiling quit because he could not handle the oppressiveness of the house any longer. Another painter ran downstairs and told the Pointers that he heard horse hooves on the cobblestone street outside. And Richard Pointer looked outside and said there were no horses, and there certainly was no longer cobblestone lining the street.
Oh my.
Interesting story, though. They didn't even realize that there had been cobblestone connected to the Lemp Mansion. The driveway that went up to it had been cobblestone. They had to do some kind of irrigation repair or something. When they dug down, they found the cobblestones under the grass.
Wow.
Restaurant employees have reported disembodied footsteps, strange noises, seeing apparitions appear and disappear, and glasses have gone flying off the bar all by themselves.
Billy's illegitimate son had been nicknamed cruelly Monkey Face Boy. He died in the mansion during the time that Charles lived there when he was in his 30s. People reportedly see the face of a young boy with Down syndrome peeking out of the attic windows. Paranormal investigators have brought toys into the attic and drawn circles around them, only to find them moved later. EVPs of a young voice saying, "Come play with me," have been recorded, and even guests claim to hear the same thing audibly. Betsy told Diane a chilling story about this spirit. One night, she was taking paranormal researcher and medium Chris Fleming through the house. They got to the stairs leading up to the attic, and there had been a teddy bear sitting on the stairs as a trigger object. They opened the door to the stairs, which were fairly narrow, and before they climbed the stairs, the teddy was picked up into the air and twirled upside down, and then back to right side up and set down.
Now, if I had read that story, I'd be like, that sounds like a lot of BS to me.
Mm-hmm.
But having Betsy tell me that story herself and that she watched it with Chris Fleming, she said Chris Fleming has seen some stuff.
Right.
And she's like, our jaws just hit the floor and we're like, what just happened?
I would imagine. I think I would react the same.
Yeah. So that does make me believe that there's somebody here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a quote unquote child or childlike person. Anybody could pick up the teddy bear and spin it around like that. But that does make you wonder if there was somebody, that maybe there's something to this story. I hope there's nothing to it, because how horrible for him just to be locked up in an attic for his whole life.
Yeah, I agree.
Of course, at the time, what they thought about people who had Down syndrome or anybody who'd have a disability like that, a lot of the time it was like, leave them to die somewhere.
Right. They would hide them away.
Yeah. So I guess it's better to hide them away than the alternative, but the woman's bathroom has become home to the leering eye of Billy. One woman had been at the bar with 2 male friends. She excused herself, and while she was doing her business, she looked up and saw a man peeking over the stall. She returned to her male companions and remarked that she hoped they had gotten an eyeful. So she apparently thought it was one of them. Both denied being the peeping Tom. Billy also apparently kicks the door to the bedroom that had been his father's room. And that's probably because the story goes that Billy had kicked the door in to get through after his father had committed suicide. So it's probably some kind of a residual sound.
The staircase features the disembodied footsteps of someone running quickly up the stairs, and glowing orbs have been witnessed moving up and down the stairs. The back staircase is where Charles's dog is heard panting and clicking his paws against the floor. In William Sr.'s room, a white glowing apparition with a beard was seen near the sliding door that leads to the bathroom. The Lavender Lady suite occasionally has a distinctly lavender scent. The door opens on its own even after being locked, and a shadow figure has been witnessed. The diminutive Lavender Lady has sometimes been seen as a full-bodied apparition. A piano on the first floor plays itself occasionally, and it really doesn't matter where the piano is placed. It has been heard playing itself for over 40 years. The tunes are usually ragtime,
Well,
which
at least it's good
I
stuff.
love. Yeah. A tour guide was strolling the grounds and reported hearing something that many people have claimed to hear. The sound is that of horses braying and snorting with bridles clinking. The area that this is heard is where the carriage houses had once been. The basement is reportedly a scary place and has been nicknamed the Gates of Hell. An angry, shadowy presence seems to hang out near the sealed-off tunnel. Perhaps he is angry that he can't go into the party.
I mean, I would be. You're like, hey, there's a pool and everything, auditorium over there. I want to get over with the crowd.
A white misty apparition has been seen, and when photographed, a white orb appears on film.
Troy Taylor wrote the book Haunted St. Louis, and I wanted to share some of the stories that he has in here in regards to the Lemp Mansion. First is a story from a waitress. This waitress's name was Bonnie Strayhorn, and she encountered an unusual customer while working one day. The restaurant had not yet opened for business when she saw a dark-haired man seated at one of the tables in the rear dining room. She was surprised that someone had come in so early, but she went over to ask if he would like a cup of coffee. He simply sat unmoving and did not answer. Bonnie frowned and glanced away for a moment. When she looked back moments later, the man had simply vanished. There was no time for him to have left the room. He was just gone. Soon after the incident, she left the Lemp Mansion and went to work at a non-haunted location.
Goodness.
It's funny because I'm like, why would that scare you? Because, I mean, he didn't do anything to her other than disappear.
Right.
And it's so weird to me how often you hear that story that like somebody looks away for a moment and then looks back and the person has vanished. Why is it that people always are like looking at somebody and then look away? Do they make throw off a sound like a ventriloquist? Like, I'm going to make a falling noise over there. So they look over and are like, what was that? And then they look back.
Well, I mean, in this circumstance, she was serving and working and so forth. So
maybe she was looking over at the coffee maker and was like, do we have coffee made yet? And then was like, oh.
Let me hurry up and make a fresh pot.
They also had a seance conducted in here. This seance was conducted by the Haunt Hunters, and this was back in the 1970s. Haunt Hunters was led by Phil Goodwilling and Gordon Honer. They researched paranormal events and haunted locations around the St. Louis area, which is interesting. I mean, we're talking the 1970s. They learned about many of their cases while teaching a class on the supernatural at St. Louis University. One semester, they promised students they would take them to a real haunted place and decided that the Lemp Mansion fit the bill. They brought the class to the house and invited a local television crew to come along with them. They spent the entire night at the house using planchettes, like the pointers used with the Ouija board, but with a pencil on the tip to write out messages from the spirit world to try and make contact with the resident ghosts. The results of the evening were chilling, especially after one group of students who had no knowledge of the house's history received a message from a spirit who identified himself as Charles.
Oh my.
He asked the students to help him reach Edwin.
Oh.
So he's looking for his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Goodwilling later noted that these 4 students were the most skeptical in the class. In addition, no one who was present that night, with the exception of himself, Gordon Honer, and Dick Pointer, had any idea that Charles had committed suicide there. At that time, the history of the house had not been widely publicized. By the time the seance was over, those 4 students were no longer the most skeptical in the class.
I would imagine not.
And then, of course, Troy has investigated this location many times. Troy writes, I rented the entire house one night in May, around the time of the anniversary of Charles Lemp's suicide, and was joined at the house by friends who also had an interest in the haunts. On this particular night, we had brought along a Ouija board, in the tradition of the Haunt Hunters, and took it up to the attic to try it out. At that time, the attic of the house was unfinished and had not yet been renovated into guest rooms. The 5 of us placed the Ouija board on a small table and gathered around it in wooden chairs. As mentioned, the attic was unfinished then and quite a mess. There were pieces of wood and old doors stacked around, and the air was thick with years of dust and grime. Previous visitors to the attic had left things behind, including several small candles. Our Ouija board session began with 2 of us trying it at a time, and this went on for a half hour or so. Nothing happened. Two of the group's members made an especially valiant effort and then gave up in frustration. One of my friends let out a sigh and suggested that someone else give the board a try. As soon as he spoke, we all heard the sound of something sliding across the floor. Even though no one had been near it, one of the candles that had been left in the room slid across the floor on its own. It moved about 10 feet from one side of the room to the other, passing directly under our chairs.
Very strange.
Another favorite encounter took place a few years later when I was at the house with my friend John Winterbauer. The rest of our party had left for the night around 4:30 a.m., and John and I walked through the house, straightening chairs and making sure that we left everything in order. We had just finished in the front dining room, Billy Lemp's former office, when we heard the sounds of glass shattering in the atrium at the back of the house. Fearing that a glass had been left too close to the edge of the table the restaurant staff usually set up the tables before they left each night, we went back to take a look. I turned on the lights, prepared to clean up broken glass, but there was nothing to see. There was no broken glass. Nothing had moved, and all was exactly as it was supposed to be. We had no idea where the sound could have come from, but wherever a glass had shattered, it had not been in our world.
Wow. Legends of America toured the mansion, and they reported on their website.
So basically, they're staying here at the Lemp Mansion, and there's other people that are going to be staying at the mansion. So it's just like staying at a hotel or whatever. So you keep your door closed and locked.
As we began to make our way back down the stairs and passed by William Lemp Sr.'s room, Amy pulled me aside because the door was standing wide open with the key in the door.
So they're probably thinking, oh, there's somebody in that room. This would be a chance for us to get to look in there because the guy killed himself in there. And you're assuming if the key's in the door, the people who are staying in that room are there.
They go on. Not going in, we continued our journey down the hall when an alarm was raised by the guests of the room. When they had arrived back from dinner, they found the door wide open and were looking for a manager. However, there was no key in the door when they arrived. A manager quickly responded it was impossible that there had been a key in the door, as there were only 2 keys to that room. One was in the hands of the guest, the other in the hands of the manager. So, who opened the door? And where was the key that we saw when we passed?
Clearly, they saw what they saw. Even if they imagined seeing the key, I don't think these guests left their room wide open like that.
Yeah, not likely. Later, several members of the group would describe having passed a man in the hallway holding a key in his hand and described as acting irritated with the large group moving through the hallway. Described as pale, older, and wearing a white shirt and black pants, no one thought anything of it at the time, believing him to be a member of the staff. However, we would find that there was no such gentleman working or staying at the mansion that night that met that description. Though no harm was done, nothing was disturbed in the guest room. The whole experience was very bizarre.
Ghost Adventures investigated, and they heard a loud bang and a man's audible disembodied voice. The spirit box said, "Who died and help me?" A ball of light was picked up coming from a bed towards Aaron. And then there's this. A man's voice is captured. And this was after Zach, is challenging him and saying, why did you kill yourself and leave your family? A bunch of them then ended up killing themselves too because of your death and blah, blah, blah. What seems to be heard is, I see them here, or it could have been, I was half a man. I mean, those are 2 totally different things, but either one of those are very interesting responses to that.
Definitely. Delisa on TripAdvisor reported, when we got there, we found out that my husband, stepdaughter, and I were the only ones staying in the house that night. We had the lavender room and Elsa's room. Around 1 a.m, we heard voices talking down the hall on the 3rd floor. While sitting in Elsa's room, we also heard something crawling down the hall. It was terrifying. My stepdaughter stayed the night on the couch in the lavender room with us. I did not sleep at all. We didn't even turn down the beds. I would have hid under the covers at least.
What are they
if you're
thinking?
Scared.
Yeah, I mean, that's your protection. Get under the covers. Would have had no problem. Username DonBroyle73 commented, I visited this place about a month ago after reading about it on Atlas Obscura. I'd never even heard of it. I was standing in the open doorway by the women's restroom and felt something touch my left arm. It wasn't from me bumping into the frame, and there was nothing hanging there. Another experience I had was being touched on both of my legs as if a toddler or small child was running around me in circles. Or could it have been a dog?
Oh, possibly, because he did kill his dog.
I mean, people hear Charles' dog, so maybe I'm assuming it was a bigger dog. I don't know what kind of dog it was. It could be rubbing against his legs or something. And I believe I may have caught the reflection of a shadow person in a window outside the basement door at the rear of the home. Interesting place, to say the least.
Did tragedy leave the Lemp Mansion ripe for hauntings? Are the only ones in the mansion those that are still living? Is the Lemp Mansion haunted?
That is for you to decide. Great place. One of these days, I got to get you there, Kelly, and maybe we'll get a chance to investigate it.
I would look forward to it.
Well, thank you guys for joining us on this Redux. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye.